Hi everyone, it's Stephanie here and welcome back. In today's video, I'm going to be creating two cards that are inspired by design team member Francine. These are her cards on screen, and I'm going to recreate them in today's video to show you how she came up with this design. So I'm going to be using the marble background stamp. This is new from our January 2018 release, and I'm going to heat emboss this onto a white cardstock panel. So I have the background stamp on my work surface, and I have my Versamark ink, and I'm just applying this liberally to the stamp. I want a lot of ink on that stamp. And I am using my anti-static embossing bag there to just kind of treat that cardstock to make sure I don't have embossing powder stick where I don't want it. And then I'm just taking that panel directly to the stamp, and I'm going to use my fingers and just use even pressure to transfer all of that ink to my cardstock panel. Once I have that transferred over, I'm going to add a bunch of white embossing powder. So I'm using Wow Opaque White. This is a great white embossing powder. It's super bright white when you emboss with it, and I really love how nice and clear it embosses. So I'm adding this to the entire panel, and I'm just doing it over a coffee filter to catch all of the excess embossing powder so that I can easily put it back into the jar. And then I just took that to my heat tool and I heat set the entire panel. So now all of that embossing powder is fully heat set, and I have that beautiful marble background all over that entire panel. So now we're going to add a bunch of ink to the background, and we're going to create a rainbow design. So I'm just going to start with my red, which is Candied Apple Distress Ink, and I'm going to work my way up the panel with all of the different colors. So next I'm using Picked Raspberry. I don't usually use pink when I do a rainbow pattern, but I felt like the pink would look nice kind of mixed with these colors, so I did decide to add that. Once I was finished with the pink, I did move on to the rest of the colors. So I did Carved Pumpkin for the orange color. And anytime I felt like I wasn't getting a nice blend, I would just go back to the original color I had started with before the color I was working on. And I would just use that ink blending tool to kind of help blend all of that color together. So once I was done orange, I moved on to yellow. So that one is Squeeze Lemonade. And then I finished the panel with Mowed Lawn, which is my green, Salty Ocean, which is the blue color, and then I added a little bit of Wilted Violet to the very top portion of that panel. And you can see as I added the color that the embossing is definitely resisting the ink, but I always like to go back in with a paper towel once I have all of the ink laid down, and I like to fully kind of go over the entire surface to kind of remove any of that ink that might still be sitting on top of the embossing powder. So now we have this beautiful marble background and these great colors mixed in with it. I just think it's a beautiful stamp. I love the detail, and I really love the rainbow look with all of the colors mixed together. Now, one of the great things about creating background panels is that you can get multiple cards out of one panel. So what I'm going to do here is I've cut the panel in half diagonally, and now I have two separate pieces. And we're going to add these pieces to two separate card bases. So I have white card bases that are top folding and measure 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches, which is an A2 size card. And I'm just adding these marble rainbow pieces to both of these cardstock bases. So one of them is going to have it at the top area, and one is going to have it at the bottom. So you have this really great white detail, and then we have all of this color with that great embossed background mixed in. Now to add the sentiment, we're going to use the From the Heart stamp set, and we're going to stamp 2 strips of white cardstock. So I have the stamp set here, and I'm just going to go ahead and grab the 2 sentiments, and we're just going to stamp these right in the center area of the cardstock strips. Now these are cut way longer than we need, so we're just going to trim them down once we have them adhered to the card. But I definitely wanted to make sure that I had them long enough and not too short. So I just cut them directly off a large size piece of paper, and then we can just trim them down. So since the cards are pretty simple and they don't have a lot of detail on them, we are going to add the sentiment strips with some foam adhesive just for a little bit of added dimension. So I added a strip of foam adhesive on both cards along the edge of that pattern cardstock that we created. And then I'm just going to place my sentiment strips directly over top of those on a diagonal so that it lines up perfectly with the edge that we've created on that stamped and embossed piece. And then I can just quickly flip the card over to cut off the excess that we have on the ends of those sentiment strips. And then we have this great pattern on the top area or the bottom. And we have this sentiment strip kind of running down the center of the card to separate the white space from the pattern with that dimension underneath. Now to finish it off, I'm adding a few gems to both of the sentiment strips. So I have some pink ones on the first card, and then I use some aqua ones on the second card, just to add something a little bit more to this card to make it look completely finished. And now we have 2 cards that we've created by just making one background panel. So thanks so much to Francine for creating these cards for us to recreate today. Thank you so much for joining me in today's video, and I will see you in another one soon.